Before the first American soldiers set foot on European soil, a different kind of army had already crossed the Atlantic. An army of bankers, brokers, and businessmen, armed not with rifles, but with credit. They didn't march, they negotiated. They didn't bleed, they invested. And by the time President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress for a declaration of war, America's neutrality had already been sold. Quietly, profitably, and irreversibly. Welcome to the hidden balance sheet of World War I, where morality was the slogan, but money wrote the orders. In August 1914, when the guns of Europe first roared, the United States stood apart. Wilson promised neutrality, impartial in thought as well as in action. But neutrality is expensive, and business was too good to stay impartial for long. The war tore apart Europe's trade networks. Factories shut down, currencies collapsed, and ports went silent. But across the Atlantic, America's warehouses overflowed. Grain, oil, steel. The world's war machine needed supplies, and the only major power still at peace was the United States. By 1915, American exports to the Allied nations had multiplied fourfold. Factories ran day and night. Workers filled their pockets, but Wall Street filled its vaults. And behind those booming ledgers stood one man, J.P. Morgan, Jr. Morgan's bank became the financial heart of the Allied war effort. Britain and France appointed his firm as their official purchasing agent, ordering everything from locomotives to bullets. For every transaction, Morgan earned a commission. But soon, the Allies' gold reserves began to run dry. They'd shipped literal tons of bullion across the Atlantic, guarded convoys of gold bars glimmering under the New York sun. When the gold was gone, Morgan offered credit. In 1915, he organized a $500 million loan, the largest in history at that time. Within 2 years, that number ballooned into billions. Wall Street had staked its fortune and America's financial stability on an Allied victory. If Britain fell, Morgan fell. If France defaulted, Wall Street collapsed. Suddenly, neutrality wasn't just impossible, it was unprofitable. President Wilson knew this. His Treasury Secretary knew it. Behind closed doors, the administration faced an uncomfortable truth. America's financial system was tied to the outcome of a foreign war. Yet publicly, Wilson preached peace. He won re-election in 1916 on a single phrase: he kept us out of war. But in the halls of finance, another slogan was already echoing: if the Allies lose, we lose. On May 7, 1915, the Lusitania passenger ship was torpedoed by a German submarine. Nearly 1,200 died, including 128 Americans. The press erupted in outrage. Germany claimed the ship was carrying munitions. Britain denied it. Decades later, divers would find munitions in its wreck, proving Germany had been right. But in 1915, facts didn't matter. Emotion did. The Lusitania tragedy didn't pull America into war immediately, but it cracked the moral wall of neutrality. Bankers, newspapers, and politicians all saw what the moment could mean. Germany had become the villain, the Allies the victims, and the United States the reluctant savior. By early 1917, the financial noose tightened. Britain warned it could no longer pay its debts. A default would bankrupt New York's biggest banks. Then came two events that changed everything: Germany's return to unrestricted submarine warfare and the infamous Zimmermann telegram, promising Mexico U.S. territory if it joined the war. Wilson now had the justification he needed. On April 2, 1917, he stood before Congress and declared war, not for profit, he said, but for principle. The world must be made safe for democracy. But behind those words was a silent truth. The world also had to be made safe for American credit. War is expensive, and someone had to pay for it. The U.S. government issued Liberty bonds, turning citizens into lenders. Posters urged Americans to support the troops, but the money went to the same obligations Morgan and others had already created, now guaranteed by taxpayers. Wall Street's private risk became public debt, and patriotism became the perfect disguise for profit. Over the next 2 years, the United States poured more than $20 billion into the war. Factories expanded, farmers prospered, and industrialists like DuPont, the makers of explosives, saw profits multiply tenfold. For the first time in its history, America became a creditor nation, not a borrower. London had been the banker of the world. Now that title belonged to New York. When the guns finally fell silent in 1918, Europe was shattered, its cities in ruins, its treasuries empty. But across the Atlantic, America's economy was roaring. The war that was supposed to make the world safe for democracy had made America rich and powerful beyond precedent. Factories that once built shells now built automobiles. Banks that once lent to kings now financed governments. And the Federal Reserve, created only 4 years before the war, emerged as the central command of global finance. The United States hadn't conquered Europe with soldiers. It had inherited it, balance sheet by balance sheet. But power always demands purpose. Wilson came to Europe not as a conqueror, but as an architect. He dreamed of a League of Nations, a moral order to prevent future wars. Yet beneath the speeches about peace, the financial structure of empire had already shifted. The Allied debts gave Washington leverage over London and Paris. The dollar began to challenge the pound as the world's reserve currency. America hadn't just joined the war, it had used it to rewrite the global hierarchy. Democracy became the story. Debt became the system. The 1920s saw America ascend. Industries flourished, credit exploded, and speculation ran wild. But underneath the optimism lay the same foundation: a world built on debt, dependent on American finance. When the Great Depression struck a decade later, the debts of Europe came crashing down again, and the seeds of another world war were sown in the ashes of the first. So, what truly brought America into World War I? Was it the defense of democracy? The outrage over the Lusitania? The idealism of President Wilson? Or was it something quieter? The whisper of balance sheets? The logic of interest? The invisible hand that turns morality into currency? Perhaps it was all of it, the perfect storm of ideals and interests. But history leaves its fingerprints not in speeches, not in flags, but in ledgers. The war to end all wars didn't end anything. It merely began a new era, where nations fight with money before they ever fight with men. And the question that haunted 1917 still echoes today. When America goes to war, is it for freedom or for finance? History doesn't repeat itself. It compounds.